vision.
Welcome to the D-List, the show where I list things and my name begins with a D. If I ever go into witness protection and change my name, I'll call the show something else. Once again, a favorite television series of mine is coming to a close, and once again I find myself reflecting on the most brilliant episodes. Parks and Recreation, the beloved mockumentary about small government in the fictional town of Pawnee, Indiana, had a long and delightful run, putting its very talented ensemble through all sorts of wonderful escapades. And so I'm going to list just a few of my favorites of those escapades. But let me tell you, narrowing it down to just a few favorite episodes was a very difficult task. And there's no better man for a difficult task than Burt Macklin, FBI. Let's do this for the safety of the president. Number 15, Practice Date. Leslie is nervous about her first date with Officer Louis C.K., so Anne pretends to be him on a practice date to get the nervousness out of her system. It works a little too well. Meanwhile, in the wake of Councilman Dexhart's major sex scandal, everyone in the office sees just how much dirt they can dig up on each other. For my money, this is probably the first truly classic episode of Parks and Rec. Leslie and Anne's friendship was the core of the show for most of its run, and this episode highlights that friendship at its best. And we have Leslie's endlessly quotable awkwardness.
Well, I was, dropping my niece off.
What's your niece's name?
Torple? What? I don't know. That's not a name. I don't have a niece. I have to go to the, Whiz Palace.
And her equally, if not more quotable drunkenness.
You make a better door than a guy. Can I use your bathroom?
Yes.
Are you impressed that I know what it's called?
Plus, the department goofs off together, we get the earliest look at Jerry's status in the office, we get the first appearance of Councilman Dexhart, we get the first appearance of Duke Silver, who Mark knows about somehow, doesn't matter, nobody remembers Mark. And although he hasn't quite found his distinctive voice yet, we also get the first appearance of everybody's favorite newsman, Perd Hapley. Number 14, Smallest Park. Ben and Leslie are working on their final project together, and Leslie tries to draw it out as long as possible to avoid Ben falling out of her life. Meanwhile, Ron and April help Andy seek out a community college class that's right for him. And Tom is tasked with designing a new logo for the Parks Department. Leslie is at her most clingy and manipulative in this episode, which is very fun to watch, but it's also very satisfying to see her get called out on it.
You're a steamroller! You are a massive, enormous, runaway steamroller with no brakes and a cement brick on the gas pedal.
She finally has to face just how selfish a lot of her behavior really is, but she still gets what she wants in the end anyway. But hey, it's what the audience wanted too. And really, how many other shows are going to give you Comic Sans jokes? And hey, is there any trio on television funnier than Ron, April, and Andy? Each of them have some key things in common, but they're also all very different people, and seeing them together always leads to great comedy. And let's face it, Ron is the best father figure either of them could ask for.
Of all my co-workers, he is one of a small number whom I do not actively root against. There I go, getting all sappy.
I'm just sad we never got to see more of Andy in college. That would have made a great spin-off.
That is extremely incorrect.
I thought maybe it was when I was. Yep. I'll get him next time. Back to you, Professor.
Number 13, Leslie and Ben. During the fundraiser for the new park, Leslie and Ben decide to get married tonight. There are obstacles along the way. This episode is, of course, a celebration of Leslie and Ben, but it's also a celebration of every important relationship in Leslie's life, especially her relationship with Anne and her relationship with Ron.
You are a wonderful person. Your friendship means a lot to me. And you look very beautiful.
And I guess her rivalry with Jam. Oh, and her relationships with Lil Sebastian and JJ's Waffles get brief acknowledgments too. There are only so many variations one can do on a wedding episode, and this might not break any particularly new ground, but when you've been with these characters for this long, it's hard not to get emotional. Number 12, End of the World. The local cult known as the Reasonableists are predicting the end of the world and hold a ceremony in the park. Even though everyone thinks the Reasonableists are insane, some of the gang are facing endings of their own, and they all react to the idea of the end in different ways. This episode is a fine example of the writers incorporating topical elements into Pawnee's local life. By making Pawnee its own strange microcosm of the country, this story of a calendar-pinpointed end times prediction can still entertain long after the rest of us have forgotten who Harold Camping is. With the premise set up, the rest of the episode is pure character work. Leslie's mourning the end of her relationship with Ben, and she's jealous that he might be moving on with Shauna Mulway-Tweep. Tom and Jean-Ralphio are mourning the loss of their company by throwing the biggest party they can. Andy and April are cramming as much bucket list fun into one night as they can.
I'd like to remake the movie Kazam with Shaquille O'Neal where he plays a genie, and I'd like to get it right.
Chris and Ann's thoughts about death lead them to celebrate life. And Ron's just an opportunist.
What religion am I? Well, I'm a practicing none of your business.
It's a fun and sweet look into each of these characters' inner lives and a celebration of the strangeness of Pawnee. Number 11, London. Thanks to April's nomination, Leslie is invited to an award ceremony in London. Andy and Ben come along to pitch their charity proposal to a wealthy donor. Ron explores Europe reluctantly. Back at home, Tom's business is threatened by a mysterious competitor, and Chris and Ann have exciting news. The A story in this episode is about Leslie coming to terms with the fact that the city she loves more than anything in the world might never love her back. It's a heartbreaking notion, to be sure, and every time she seems to be at her lowest point, something worse happens. But she's Leslie Knope, damn it. She can't be held down for long. Parks and Rec did several Let's Go to Such and Such Famous City episodes over the course of its run, and while much of this episode could probably have taken place anywhere, if nothing else, the Europe trip was worth it for a few amazing gags. And besides, there is nothing more fun than watching Chris Pratt and Peter Serafinowicz pal around. Not too long before Serafinowicz called him an a-hole. Oh, and we also get Ron and Diane's wedding, which is an absolutely perfect scene, and some fine guest appearances from Henry Winkler and the always fantastic Mark Evan Jackson. He's from Earth. Number 10, Media Blitz. Leslie, Tom, and Ben go on a press tour to promote the Harvest Festival, but things get uncomfortable when everyone wants to know about Ben's disastrous career as an 18-year-old mayor.
Seems like 18 is pretty young for a mayor. What were you, like 12?
Meanwhile, Andy wants April to stay in Pawnee, so he spends the day doing every task she hates. While it's pretty clear from the start that Ben was being introduced as the new straight man and possibly the new love interest, at first he was a somewhat tough antagonist. This episode was the first to show him at his most vulnerable.
Who hasn't had gay thoughts?
And there is no better Adam Scott than awkward Adam Scott.
There are a lot of cars. I mean, not too many trucks and stuff, but, you know.
Cool. Good talk, Icetown.
Okay.
We also get the first appearance of Matt Besser and Nick Kroll as Crazy Ira and the Douche, Pawnee's favorite drive-time shock jocks. Their humor is about at the level you'd expect from Midwest drive-time shock jocks. And we get plenty of Andy and April, one of the most delightfully bizarre couples in television history.
That's all the time we have here on Ya Heard. I'm Perd Hapley, Channel 4.
More like Turd Crapley.
Number 9, The Debate. Written and directed by Amy Poehler herself, this episode showcases the city council debate between Leslie Knope, Bobby Newport, and several minor characters who apparently were also running, including everyone's favorite porn star who seems to have a crush on Leslie, Brandy Max. This episode gives us Leslie at her most passionate, Paul Rudd at his most delightfully doofy, and the whole team coming together to support Leslie in their own ways. Andy's way involves reenacting his favorite movies. I would watch an entire series of that. The montage of debate sound bites is so much fun, and only slightly wackier than actual political debates, but significantly less depressing.
Daniel Craig. No. Timothy Dalton.
Number 8, Jerry's Painting. Leslie's been feeling powerless lately, so she's surprisingly flattered when Jerry's painting of his favorite myth bears a resemblance to her.
Every time I look at it, I just think to myself, what can't that centaur woman do? Besides ride an escalator and drive a car. Art can be so magnificent.
But the painting depicts nudity, so it comes under quite a bit of controversy. Meanwhile, Ben moves in with April and Andy and tries to teach them how to be adults.
I have total faith in you. There's like a 30% chance they'll both die.
For someone who always tries to present herself as so strong, it's really heartbreaking to see Leslie just feel no strength at all. And where normally she might find Jerry's inadvertent painting of her creepy, it's nice to see it give her inspiration. And it's wonderful to see her fight to defend it.
Heard, it is a beautiful work of art. Governments should not be in the business of censorship, especially when a painting is as awesome as this one.
And it's extra wonderful to see the start of Ben's run as Andy and April's roommate.
The biggest challenge to picking the perfect roommate is finding someone who's willing to pay more than their share of rent without knowing it.
I think we found that in Ben.
The clash between their maturity levels is the stuff of comedy legend. And I'm almost sad we didn't get millions of episodes just focusing on them all being roommates. But I don't want to be ungrateful for the handful of really great episodes we did get about them being roommates. Number 7, Citizen Nope. Leslie has been suspended from work, and she forms a citizen action committee to change things from the outside. But her campaign for city council might not recover so easily. Meanwhile, a newly unemployed Ben seeks out work in the private sector. So much about this episode is perfect, from Leslie's committee's name, to Ron's inability to work with gingerbread, to the beginning of the tragic doomed romance between Barney's accounting firm and Ben's career goals. The ending is just one of many wonderfully heartwarming scenes in the series, and the single-shot cold tag might be Jean-Ralphio's second best moment. And hey, Clara from the Guild shows up.
Well, your daughter is an idiot. Her daughter is an idiot. Her daughter is an idiot.
Number 6. The Bubble. Ben and Leslie are still in the honeymoon stage of their secret relationship, but that's threatened by Ben's disastrous encounters with Leslie's mother, Marlene. Meanwhile, Chris tries to shake things up at the Parks Department, making absolutely nobody happy except Andy. Well, and the audience.
Chris! I wasn't super paying attention to what you just said that we'll be doing, but I will give 110%. As soon as you repeat yourself in a more interesting way.
Ben and Leslie's A story is certainly a significant and enjoyable one, and is one of the few instances on modern television to hear a quote from America's greatest work of literature.
But your demands remind me of a different quote from the great Bill Watterson. You need a lobotomy, I'll get a saw.
I love Calvin and Hobbes.
Me too.
But most of the joy of this episode comes from reveling as Chris has placed each and every member of the staff in exactly the wrong situation for them.
I'm down to one word a minute, and the word is Perflippus Club, because I can't fly spaceships.
This leads to delightful moments like the introduction of Ethel Beavers.
Remind me next time to ask her where she was when Lincoln got shot.
Remind Tom, ask something.
The plight of a defenseless Ron.
What about my office and its many walls?
And the greatest Dana Gould cameo anyone could ask for.
Tell Mort I said, your move.
We see how Ron truly understands his staff, and despite himself, he wants to help them. And while they don't interact much throughout the episode, we also briefly see why Leslie and Ron make such a perfect team. Number 5. The Comeback Kid. She may have lost her campaign managers, but Leslie is attempting to relaunch her city council campaign with the gang's help. And everything that could go wrong does go wrong. Meanwhile, Chris tries to comfort a newly unemployed Ben, who is deep in denial. In general, Parks and Recreation is one of the most optimistic comedies on television, but that doesn't mean they're afraid to just have everything go wrong sometimes.
I tried to make ramen in the coffee pot and I broke everything.
In setting up her big announcement, every single little step along the way goes wrong, and the press conference itself is an unthinkable disaster. But holy crap, is it funny. Meanwhile, Ben's depressed attempts to get entrepreneurial bring him back to one of his food obsessions.
The locale, calzone, zone.
And in the most hilariously painful sequence in the entire series, lead to an experiment in stop-motion animation.
Did you pause it?
Yeah, this bit must have been written by someone who tried Claymation at some point in their youth, because it is so on point it's almost not funny.
You see, in my head, I thought that was really, really cool. In fact, I emailed Leslie 2 days ago and I compared it to Avatar, Chris, and how can it not be longer?
Ah, who am I kidding? It's funny. On the plus side, we get the first appearance of Pawnee's second favorite small animal, Champion.
Okay, I have to ask this, I'm sorry, but how many legs did that dog have when you found him?
3! That's what makes him the best. He can do more with 3 legs than most dogs can do with 4.
Except for digging. He's really bad at digging.
Number 4, Moving Up. There is so much plot to recap in this one. Leslie's speaking in San Francisco. Ben's trying to get Grizzle to give free wireless to Pawnee. Tom's rushing the opening of his restaurant. Pawnee is prepping for the Unity concert. Leslie has to decide between moving to her dream job and staying in her beloved hometown. The return of the Cones of Dunshire, the cameos from beloved characters, the cameos from famous musicians, the cameo in the end credits, the cameo from the First Lady of the United States of America. The perfect conclusion to Ron Swanson's ever-so-gradual character arc. The characters finding their successes, the setup for the final season. This episode did something remarkable. This episode was so wonderful and satisfying that I would have been happy if it was the series finale. And yet at the same time, it made me so excited for what was still to follow. How does a show do that? How does a show make you simultaneously ready to close the book and ready to keep on going? I don't know, but man, the series finale has a lot of work to do to top the feeling I got from this season finale. And I say bring it on. But not too soon. I'm not ready to say goodbye yet.
You ready?
Not at all. But that's never stopped us before.
Number 3. Spoiler alert, this next entry comes from the current season, so if you're not all caught up on the show, you may want to skip ahead a bit if you want to avoid spoilers. Go ahead, I'll be here. Okay, they should be gone by now. So, Leslie and Ron. Leslie and Ron have been fighting for a few years now, and everyone else is sick of it, so they lock the two up in the Parks Department overnight in an attempt to get them to work it out. Reluctantly, the duo revisits the road that dissolved their friendship. Anyone could write a script with these plot points, but only these characters on this show could give them this significance. Leslie isn't just mad because Ron tore down her old friend's house, it's because he tore down Anne's house. Ron wasn't just hurt because Leslie blew him off, it's because she blew him off when he, Ron Swanson, was forced to admit that he missed his friends and was even willing to work for the federal government to be with them. Ron Swanson, federal government. This episode only works as well as it does as the payoff to 7 years of getting to know, understand, and truly love these characters. There's callbacks aplenty, but they never feel like fan service. They all ring true. I was surprised at how early in the season the Ron-Leslie fight subplot was wrapped up, but I certainly wasn't disappointed. Especially not now that we have the definitive version of We Didn't Start the Fire.
Harry Truman was the guy, America, Red China, all the countries, other people, everyone is fun. Joe Montana, E. McKellen, I have to buy a new toaster, this is awesome, you're so stupid, jumping up and down.
Alright, let's just wait a few moments for the people who are skipping the spoilery bits to catch up with us. Yeah. Alright, everybody back? Cool! Let's move on to the next entry. Number 2, The Fight. Man, seasons 3 and 4 really were the golden age of parks. Tom invites everyone to the Snake Hole Lounge to try out his new beverage, snake juice. Leslie tries to get Anne a job at City Hall, but is disappointed in Anne's seeming lack of initiative, and Anne's frustrated with Leslie's steamrolling, and the duo has their first fight. Meanwhile, Andy and April spend the night being Burt Macklin and Janet Snakehole, who totally deserve their own spin-off. I've been proposing a lot of spin-offs involving Andy. Make them all happen. Chris Pratt can't be that busy. Something about the Snakehole Lounge so often brings out the best in this show. Often by bringing out the worst in its characters. Also written by Amy Poehler, this episode could be pitched as, let's get the characters really drunk together and see what happens. For some characters, it's fun. For others, it's depressing. For Leslie and Anne, it causes all the tension between their very different personalities to bubble to the surface. Everything that would be a point of contention between these people in real life finally comes out, and it's a rough night, but they emerge stronger for it, after their heads clear up. This episode also gives us Jean-Ralphio's single greatest moment, his misguided rapping skills.
K to the N to the O-P-E, she's the dopest little shorty in all Pawnee, Indiana. R to the O to the N, and then I say Swanson's got swagger the size of Big Ben clock. B to the O to the double S, do what he say and you'll be successful.
And my number 1 all-time favorite episode of Parks and Recreation.
Before we get started, quick announcement. Every Thursday night is Ladies' Night. Down at the Snake Hole Lounge over on Burnham Avenue, ladies get 2 drinks for the price of 1. Oh, no, that can't be right. That's way too good of a deal. Nope, that is what it says. Wow, well, that sounds like a fun time.
Flu season. A terrible flu is going around. Leslie is struck but refuses to give up on preparing her Harvest Festival presentation for the Chamber of Commerce. April is also out of commission, so Andy takes over her duties as Ron's assistant. This may be the most quotable episode of any television series.
My body's like a chip, too. Potato chip. No.
You have Leslie struck with the flu.
If I was sick, could I do this?
What are you doing?
Cartwheels. Am I not doing them? Does this scarf look okay? I don't want to look stuffy, but I also don't want to look too schlubby.
Get back in that bed.
So no to the scarf?
You have Leslie hopped up on medication.
I looked at the meter and it had Egyptian hieroglyphics on it.
Wow.
Do you know the exchange rate? Good evening, everyone. I'm Leslie Monster, and this is Nightline. Give it up, everybody, for Scott Bakula from Quantum Leap.
All right. You have Ron being Ron.
I once worked with a guy for 3 years and never learned his name. Best friend I ever had. We still never talk sometimes.
And you have Chris Pratt ad-libbing the funniest line in the entire run of the series.
Leslie, I typed your symptoms into the thing up here, and it says you could have network connectivity problems.
This episode also marks a turning point in several of the show's most fun relationships. This episode marks the first time Anne can see Chris as an equal.
I love the flu.
This episode marks the point where Ron starts to become a father figure to Andy.
I'm surrounded by a lot of women in this department, and that includes the men.
And this episode marks the moment where Ben starts to fall in love with Leslie Knope. This episode is literally flawless, and I never tire of revisiting it. And there you have it, my favorite stories of the gang from Pawnee. I am really, really going to miss them. So, what's your favorite Leslie Knope escapade, or Lescapade as she would probably say? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, this is Dave, signing off.